Good evening, everyone. Hope you all are doing fine in these testing times. I'm Renuka from Entrepreneurship Cell NIT Trichy. First of all, we are immensely happy to have you all here at the Summer Internship Program webinar. We hope you'd have a great session. Talking about our guest, Mr. Trishank Hansrajani, founder of the Career Show, is here with us. He is a creative personality who has worked in consulting, assurance, audit, and data mining industries across the globe in Los Angeles, Hong Kong, and Rio de Janeiro. He started this initiative, The Career Show, in 2020, where he guides students in choosing a proper career path. He also shares podcasts and videos on tips to resume building and acing interviews. To get to know more about him, do check out his YouTube channel, and you can also follow him on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links will be pinned soon in the comments. Without any further ado, I'll hand over to our guest, Mr. Trishank. Over to you,
Hey
sir.
guys, hey guys, hello Renuka. Thank you so much for your warm introduction. So happy to be here. Thank you for reaching out and so glad to be a part of the ESL at NIT Trichy.
Yes,
So I guess you want me to start off right away?
yes, sir. I think we can wait a few more minutes.
Sure, we can let the people join in. In the meanwhile, do you want me to give a quick introduction in the meanwhile so that the audience who's right here can also be engaged as well?
Yeah, sure, sir. Sure.
So, first of all, thank you everyone for joining in. Such an honor to be a part of this initiative. A quick introduction about me. So, Renuka already did a pretty good job. Like most of you, I'm also currently a student. I'm actually on my gap year, so it's exciting. And as Renuka said, I've done a lot of stuff. I've tried working in different industries, but the career show is an initiative that I started out of my own struggle of not being able to find all the all the things that I wanted to know about different careers out there. In fact, I'm super passionate about investment banking, and I still did not know a lot of stuff, which just made me think there are so many people out there who don't even know what they want to do. And that's how that journey started. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah. I think we can start the session now. Like, I think within 2 to 3 minutes, everyone else will join. We can start the
Sure.
session.
So, mhm.
Yeah.
Before we start the session, guys, feel free for let the comments, let the questions, and keep the let the comments and the questions keep coming in. I want the session to be as interactive as possible. I know you guys cannot like stand up and talk and stuff, but I want you guys to use the comment section so that I know what's going on. Renuka, is there any way I can know? I can see the comments as well, right? In the comment section right here.
Yeah, yeah, you can see the comments as well.
Perfect. So I can see the comments as well. So
You
if
can
you have
also share
any
the
doubt,
comments to the screen as well.
mhm,
If you wish, I can share
perfect.
the comments to the screen. Yeah.
Mhm. That's perfect. So if there is something specific that you want to ask me, so just type that question in and I'll finish saying what I'm saying and I'll tackle that question immediately if it's in relation to what I'm talking. So I hope all of you guys are excited. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Let me know when you want to start, Renuka, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, yeah, please start.
All right. Perfect. So, interviews are one thing that people are somewhat always afraid of. I don't know why that's the case, but it is. So today the entire purpose of this webinar is to make sure that whichever interview you go to, you're never scared. And we're going to be talking about things that you need to do before the interview. So pre-interview, during the interview, and post-interview. I'm not going to be sharing a presentation with you guys today because usually people just end up taking images and stuff like that. What I instead want you to do is grab a pen and paper right now and try to write down everything I'm saying because that will help you remember things more clearly. So I'm just going to wait quickly for 5 to 10 seconds. Quickly grab a pen and paper and join me. And just show me a thumbs up in the comment section if you're done so that I know when I can start off. I'm going to wait for another 5 to 10 seconds. All right, perfect. So let's get started now. I hope everyone has a pen and paper. So, the biggest mistake people make during interviews is that people. Okay, I think I just got a comment saying video is not clear. Let me see if I can fix this quickly for you guys. Hey guys, apologies for that. I hope the video and audio are more clear now. So apologies for that, but let's get right into it once again. So glad to see that all of you guys have your pen and paper with you guys. So let's talk about the first step, right? Usually people have the misconception that interviews are only going to be focused on the stuff that you need to know about the job. So technical questions, more about what's going to happen at the job. What people forget is about the behavioral questions, which end up being about themselves. Now, one thing that usually ends up happening is that when you're put on the spot to talk about yourself, you don't end up remembering the stories. So, the first thing I want you guys to do is before the interview, you need to do your research about yourself and about the company. So, first, let's talk about how you can research about yourself, right? What you need to do is you need to go online and look at the most frequently asked questions, right? The most frequently asked questions will be tell me about yourself, why do you think you're fit for this job, and more behavioral questions such as tell me about your leadership skills, tell me about a time you faced a conflict, and stuff like this. Now, when they're asking you for these incidents in your life, at this spot, it'll be hard for you to recall. But what if you write down all these questions and try to come up with a story about that question beforehand? So I don't want you to memorize the answer to the questions. What I want you to do is I want you to think about the stories that relate to that question. A lot of times you can end up using two stories for similar kind of questions, right? A conflict, a story in which you had a conflict can also be a story in which you showed leadership skills. So it's important that you realize the right question and figure it out, right? So so that's super important. After that, what you need to do is you need to prepare for the interview. Now, a lot of times what people end up doing is they don't want to interview with their friends or families. So I have this app that it was suggested to me by someone, and it's called Yobs. YOBS. So it's basically an app that throws questions at you, gives you around 30 seconds to prepare or 1 minute to prepare. I don't know the exact time that's given to you. And then you need to record yourself speaking. So it's basically giving you an opportunity to see how you react when questions are thrown at you. So now that you know the stories, it's a great opportunity for you to practice them as well. And a lot of times, what you also need to do is you need to break down your stories into points. Because what I want you guys to do is try to practice these questions, try to answer these questions in points. Why? Because that will help you communicate better with the interviewer. The entire goal of the interview is to convey to the interviewer that you're perfect for the job. If you don't talk in points, you're going to be all over the place. Like, let's take the start to this webinar itself, right? I told you that we'll be talking about three sections of the interview: pre interview, during the interview, and post interview. Then I told you the first step is doing research and then breaking it down, right? So it's super important that you talk in points. And this is doing research about yourself, which is super important, and it will help you answer all the behavioral questions come at play, right? So let's take a quick pause over here. I hope everyone has written this down, and let's see if you have any questions for me up till now. So I'm just going to wait for another 5 seconds before I talk about the next point. All right, perfect. Let's go on to researching about the company. Now, another big mistake a lot of people make is they go into the interview not knowing a lot about the company, not knowing a lot about the people working there, and not even knowing a lot about the interviewer. Now, why is this important? Because you need to know about the company so that you can frame your answers accordingly. Now, if you know that there are certain values that the company is really strict about, right? Or they follow, like they are known for those values they follow, it's obvious that they're going to ask you questions about that, right? Like, like let's take Amazon for example. I've helped a lot of people doing Amazon interviews, and Amazon has these 7 to 8 principles. And usually, what ends up happening is the interviewer always asks them stories about instances where they have shown this value. So it's so important that you know the values of the company, what the company does. And that brings me to my second point about researching about the company, and that's researching about the people that are working there. Usually, a lot of people are already told about who their interviewer is going to be. So it's so important that you research about them, because that's going to bring me to my second step, and that's during the interview. And that's building a rapport, right? Now that you've done your research about what your interviewer does, what kind of great work he has done already at the company, you know how you can relate to him or her. Now, what's super important is that as soon as you walk into an interview, all of you guys would have heard this cliche, which is first impression is the last impression. So, anyone who does not agree with me, let me know. But in this case, first impression is the last impression. The interview can last on for 30 minutes, the interview can last on for 60 minutes. But whoever is interviewing you will make his judgment within the first 30 to 60 seconds itself. So as soon as you walk into that room, you need to build a rapport and you need to have the best first impression. Now, a lot of you guys might be thinking that's easier said than done, right? So now this is what I want you to do to make that killer first impression. First, I want you to be confident as soon as you walk into the room. Right now, I know it's a lot of online interviews, and we can talk about that in the Q&A section if you like. So please feel to bring that up or send in questions right now if you like. But walk into that room with confidence And after that, what I need you to do is I need you to introduce yourself, and then talk to the guest and tell them what you think about the company, what kind of great work they have done, and they'll be like, "Wow, this guy has come in with research, and I'm so excited to talk to him and get to know about him because he already knows so much about me. So I need to know about him as well, right?" So and so that just proves that you're a committed candidate. Now, a lot of times this can happen as well that the HR or the recruiter tells you that XYZ is going to be at the interview, but due to some reasons that interviewer cannot show up. Some last minute meeting. This happens a lot of times, and I've seen it as well. So now in this case, you don't need to be like, oh no, I don't know who this person is. I didn't see his image. That's completely all right as well. Now you just need to improvise. So you go in there and you were like, oh, I don't know, never use I don't know. So never make that mistake. Instead, just say, wow, I thought this person was going to be there, but I'm so excited to meet you as well. Since I don't know much about you, can you tell me a little bit about yourself as well? So that's just showing that, wow, you've been thrown into an unknown situation, but there's still so much you can do about it. And you're still so interested to learn about the next person who's there at the interview, right? So that's how you make a killer first impression. And other thing in building your rapport at the very start is the interviewer is definitely going to tell you to talk about yourself, right? Now, this is a question that you really need to work hard on. I had made a video on this called the elevator pitch, because the reason I call it an elevator pitch is because when you're talking about a tell me about yourself question, consider you being in an elevator and you're with one of your biggest idols or models, right? Who you look up to. And you're going to be in that elevator with them only for 30 to 60 seconds. So, how are you going to pitch yourself? So, this is the question that you really need to work hard on and impress the interviewer in 30 seconds. Now, what should your tell me about yourself include? You need to talk about what you currently do. Okay. So, that's going to be a quick thing. Your name, what you currently do, what have you done in the past, so what your past experience is. Now over here you do not need to talk about your entire work history. You just need to talk about your experiences that make you a good fit for the job. So how you need to connect the two is by saying, I've done XYZ, which makes me a perfect candidate for this job because I know you're looking for XYZ in the potential candidate. And and you also talk about your hobbies and interests, because you do not want to be the kind of candidate which only talks about academics and work and stuff like that. So this question is an opportunity for you to control the rest of the conversation. And I think that's the most important part of any interview, that you have the power to control the interview process. So why not do that? If you talk about your experiences, you talk about your hobbies, your interviewer is mostly going to talk to you about those experiences and those hobbies. If the interviewer likes, if you would have done your research and you see that you guys have some kind of similar interest, definitely mention that, because the interviewer is going to be like, wow, this guy is interested in similar things to me. I need to talk to him about it. But that being said, never lie. So just because your interviewer is interested in football or cricket, it doesn't mean that you just make those things up, right? Because a lot of times what can happen is he's talking something about the sport and you don't completely know about it, and he will catch that you're lying in a split second. So never lie. So that's how you prepare for the interview, and that's how you start your interview. So now the tough part is actually over, because you've made your impression, you've done your research. Now, whatever comes up for the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes of the interview, you will be prepared for it, because you have done the main task of making that impression, and you've also done your research. So, whatever question that might be, you already have stories for that. All right. So let's see if we have any comments now. So I'm going to quickly check if we have questions in the meantime, so that we have a more engaging conversation. Any questions? All right, great. I'm guessing you guys are learning a lot. So, and you guys, all right, Nanika, that's a great question. We will get to that towards the end of the section, if that's okay with you. So, yeah. So now let's move on to the third aspect, which is a super important skill to learn, and that's being confident about yourself. You know, I was doing my research on different things that make you confident, and I came up across this quote which said 55% of communication is your body language, 38% is the tone of your voice, and only 7% is words. Now, can you just take that in for a second? The things that you're saying matter only 7%, but it's your body language and the tone you're speaking in which impresses the interviewer. Now, how important is that, right? So, even though you don't know an answer during the interview, it's so important that you stay confident. Like, always have a good posture in an interview, always have a strong tone. For example, if you don't know an answer and you go like, and then you start fidgeting, that just shows the interviewer that this guy cannot handle stress. Because let's be honest, they have been in the situations themselves. And there are going to be so many situations out there at the job that will make you think like, I don't know this. But what's important in the scenarios where you don't know is that you figure out a way out, right? Or navigate through the steps you would take to figure out the problem. And if you're going to do at the job, do the same thing at the job, you need to do the same thing at the interview as well. So just stay confident. Instead of saying, I don't know the answer, you just stay confident, like saying, don't use any negation terms, right? I don't know, not. Just say, I'm yet to learn about that, but I've done these other three things. And this is how I learned them out at the first time I was learning those things. So let's take an example of a programming language for suppose Python, right? The interview asks you to write a code in Python, uh, and you're like, I'm yet to learn Python, but I have learned Java++. And the way I learned that the first time I came across that language was doing X, Y, and Z. And I think that's what I'm going to do as well when I need to learn Python. And the interviewer will simply be impressed saying that, wow, he has connected something he did not know. And he didn't even mention that he doesn't know Python. He just said, okay, this is how I'm going to end up learning the language Python, which just shows you're so confident instead of you just fidgeting and stuff like that. It just shows you how confident you are. And it just shows them how you can work in stressful situations, right? And other thing you can do when you don't know answers and you want to stay confident is you can you can confirm the question with the interviewer, like just reiterate the question and make sure you've understood the question correctly. So as soon as you do that, the interview would clarify the question for you. And by the time he's done clarifying, something may have come to your mind, or you could have also figured out the steps you would be taking to figure out the problem. A lot of times also you can work with the interviewer, right? uh, this happens a lot in consulting interviews, wherein there is a case interview and you have to put your mind to a task, and the entire purpose of a case interview is taking your interviewer through the case and how what your thought process is. And that's what consulting interviews are known for. They simply want to see your thought process. So why do we only focus such things on a consulting interview? Because it's clear cutly mentioned over there that they're looking for your thought process. And that's something that we need to make more common, right? When you don't know an answer, just show your thought process. It's so important, right? So I actually want to take Sankalp's question before we move forward. Let me give you a quick example or a sample intro, right? So I'm going to take the question. Let's see. Let's take 30 seconds to 45 seconds for this, right? Hi, my name is Trishanks and I am currently the founder and the host of the show called The Career Show. The Career Show is basically a platform wherein we try to bridge the career knowledge gap. In the past, I've worked for companies such as PwC, and I've also worked in Rio de Janeiro as a consultant, where I've understood the client problems and analyzed those problems in detail. The reason I'm applying for this investment banking job at your company is because I think I'm a great fit. And the skills that I've acquired with the help of my jobs all across the world and with my initiative, the courage is that I can truly understand what the clients are looking for. And I know that's super important in investment banking and especially at your company, which values clients so much. So that's a quick background about myself. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to tell you more about myself. And I hope that answers your question, Salkal. A quick introduction of how you connected, who you are, what you've done in the past to the requirements of the job, which sets the right precedent for the rest of the conversation, right? So before we move on, I also want to see if there are any other questions. And if not, we would be taking Nanika's question because the next step of during the interview is how you can stand out in an interview. So let's take Nanika's question right now. So Nanika, the best way you can stand out in an interview is by communicating effectively. Like that's the most important thing. You need to communicate effectively. You need to communicate through your body language and tone. Now, what you need to do is you need to frame your answers in the star format, right? I'm sure you would have heard this a lot of times. If not, I'm going to take you through this process with me. And please, please write this down because this is so important. I've known candidates who have not been able to do well with the star method, and interviews have told me myself that I need to be more make them understand the concept more clearly, right? So let's talk about S. S stands for the situation. So whatever questions comes at you, first talk about the situation you were in. Then you talk about the the task at hand. So what were the tasks given to you in that situation? Then A is for action. What actions did you take to resolve that task? And last is R, which is the most important because that's where you can quantify your success and you talk about your results, right? So before I give you an example, what you need to do is while your research is going on, you need to divide your research into these four sections. So whatever story you come up with, divide them into situation, task, action, and results. It'll just make your life so much easier at the interview, right? Now let's give you a quick example, right? Let's take the question, tell me about a time you faced a conflict. So let's say I'm in the interview. The interviewer just asked me, hey, Trishank, tell me about a time you faced a conflict. All right. Thank you for your question. So the situation where I faced a conflict was when I was working at this company and I was a summer analyst at this company. And the people working with me were my associate, my manager, my director, and the client. The task at hand was to audit the books of a client, and the main task that we had in hand was that we were on a short deadline. So we need to make sure that we were moving perfectly. Everything was working well. We reached at the client site and we got introduced to the different clients and the different people that we needed to get our material from. However, the conflict we faced was that after the first few days, the amount of material that was being given us to audit, our requested material wasn't coming to us. So we tried to escalate this eventually, and we started mocking our manager in our emails. However, after a couple of days went by, she just thought that we were not being efficient, and she was not aware of the fact that we were missing data and we were not receiving the required data from the client. So I realized that we were facing some kind of miscommunication. So the action that I ended up taking was, first up, I decided to set up a meeting between the manager, the associate, and myself. And we just tried to clarify what the confusion was. And we tried to have an honest conversation about it. The conversation ended up telling us that the interviewer, the manager, expected us to give it a phone call as soon as we started facing data problems, and that's how we solved the problem. Moving ahead, we always called up the manager as soon as we had any problems, and she followed up with the client directly on phone, and we started getting the data. Even eventually, we ended up getting done with the project even before the deadline. So that was the situation, task, and action, and the results we took. So if you noticed what I did clearly in this example is that I clearly mentioned the situation is this, the task is this, then the conflict was this, and this is the actions I took and the results I took. I didn't try to make it ambiguous and tell them you figure out situation kya hai, task kya hai, action kya hai. No, I made it crystal clear for them that this is the situation, task. And Yanika, this is what makes you stand out in an interview if you communicate clearly with the interviewer. And I hope that answers your question. So before I move towards the end, sorry, my hair is just being a complete mess because of the lockdown. I haven't had a chance oh my God, I haven't gotten a chance to get a haircut. So apologies for the same. All right. And so let's move ahead and let's take up the question of Nikhil Roy. The question is, I mentioned about body language and how to put this up in a virtual interview, right? So this is something I wanted to get towards the later section, right? And now let's only talk about virtual interviews. So the thing about virtual interviews is that you need a clear background, right? And you do not need a lot of disturbance. So for me, if you see, there's nothing major going on distracting in the house. I do not have a clean white background. If you have that, that just makes it more easier because the interviewer will only focus on you. Um, so these are little tips that you need to take in account for your background as well. You don't need any background noise. You don't need to be hearing people shouting in the background. You need to go and tell your family members, hey, I have an interview coming up. So please make sure that you guys are talking softly, and not shouting names across the hall. And so just make sure of these small things. In terms of your own personal body language, you need to be dressed up correctly. You don't need to stand up and be wearing boxers and stuff like that. So in terms of virtual interviews, you need to sit upright, use moderate amount of right amount of actions as you've seen me using, just not doing a lot of whenever you're saying something you want to say precise, you can use your hand actions and just try to sit up straight and enjoy the conversation. Always have a smile on your face. And these are kind of tips you can use for virtual interviews, Nikhil. And let's see if we have any other questions before I move forward towards the end of the interview and what we need to do post the interview. All right, perfect. So let's talk about our next step, and that's going to be how do we end the interview, right? A lot of time, what students don't do is they don't end up asking questions to the interviewer. The interview is done, he's done asking you question. Now it's your turn to ask them questions because the purpose of an interview is to figure out that you both are a right fit. So the company is the right fit for you, and you are the right fit for the company. So the company has done the job. Now it's your job to do the same. For a lot of new entry level jobs, the kind of questions that you can ask is personal questions about your interviewer. So stuff that you cannot easily find online, right? Now, this is where again your research comes into play. So now that you've done your research, you know what all is there about the company out there online. Now you can just ask more personal questions that you won't find online. Like if your interview is probably going to be with a senior level executive at the company, so you talk to him about his journey, like what are some of the challenges he has faced, what made him stand out than his peers when he got the job, and stuff like that, which you can only have a genuine conversation and learn about it. Like you won't get answers to these questions online. Like it's his personal experience. So try to ask these questions. Make sure you know the name of the interviewer again so that you can reach out after the interview. Have a firm handshake. Again, that's obviously if it's an in-person interview. If not, thank them for their time, and just summarize your points, what makes you a good fit, and just tell them thank you once again, and I look forward to hearing back from them. And talk about the next steps also, if that's a question that you don't know an answer to. That's a great question that you can ask also in terms of the next steps, right? So now we've completed two aspects. We have spoken about what you need to do before the interview. That's your research about yourself and research about the company. You have spoken what you need to do during the interview, and that's having a great first impression, staying confident, answering in the star format, and ending the interview with asking great questions and summarizing your expertise. What makes you a good fit? Now, what happens when you go back home? You need to go ahead, reach out to your interviewer, either on LinkedIn or if you have his email, write him an email and thank them for their time. This has to be a simple email. You need to summarize your discussion points, what made the interview great, thank them for their time, and tell them you're looking forward to hearing back from them. Nothing, don't make the mistake of directly asking for the job, like, oh, I'm sure I got the job. It was like our conversation was the best. No, you thank them for their time, you summarize the points so that they just know that you were attentive during the entire conversation. You took away your points. And another purpose this can solve is in case they forget about it, because they'll be interviewing 10 different candidates. But if you send them a summarized section about what the discussion was, what made you stand out, or what was the standout of your conversation, they'll be like, oh, yeah, this guy, yeah, this was the reason his conversation stood out to me. So, this is a great way that you can stay in the minds of your interviewer post the interview as well. Try to send the email the same day at the end of the day or early next morning. Don't wait an entire week after the interview because by then it will be too late, right? A quick, and that's something you can do post your interview. And now I just want to talk about a few don'ts. So, a few interview don'ts. First is no bad manners, no rudeness. Don't be rude. Whatever they ask you, simply answer. For example, a lot of times I've seen students being like, the interview asks, so can you walk me through your resume? And students are like, that's written on my resume. Why do you want me to walk you through? Instead, use that as an opportunity to stand out and and take control of the conversation, because once you talk about the resume, the questions are going to be based on that. So use it as an opportunity. Second, if you already had a job before this and you're switching jobs, don't talk bad things about your past employer. Just talk about things you learned and the reason why you're making the switch, and make that reason as your growth opportunity. So you're looking to grow in different fields and you're trying to pick up different skills, and the company is perfect for you. So don't talk bad about your past employers. Don't appear needy about the job. Don't look desperate. Just stay confident. Don't talk about bad luck. Don't flirt with your interviewer. Never do that, please. I've seen that happening a lot of times as well. Don't try to be funny. If you're funny automatically, that's fine. But don't try to be funny. Don't try to crack jokes intentionally, because if they don't land, it will backfire. And last, don't talk about salary and benefits before even getting the job. There's no point of talking about these things. Yes, you need to negotiate about these things once you get the job offer, but please don't discuss this, because that just shows the company that you're here for the benefits and the money. Whereas that's not the case. You need to portray that you're there for the skills that you will learn, develop, and work hard, right? So keep these things in mind. With that, I would like to come to an end of the session, and now I just want to simply focus on taking in questions, as many as we get for the next 15 minutes. We will take another question from Nenika before I call Renuka back upon, and she has a few questions that were sent in earlier, so we'll take those on as well. But to answer Nenika's question, how important is the resume in an interview? I think, Nenika, it's super important, because eventually your resume is the piece of information that the interviewer is going to look through. Yes, the interviewers these days do go through your social media profiles, such as LinkedIn as well. But he's definitely going to have a copy of your resume in front of you, and he's going to be talking to you about things from that resume. So make sure that you don't lie on your resume, because again, if you lie, you won't know what to say about that thing. You'll get caught easily, and that'll be a no for you. And just know the thing that you're mentioning. If you're talking about the stuff you've done at a particular position, know about it. Just be there. You can talk freely about it. So in a nutshell, your resume is super important. Knowing what's written in your resume is even more important. So if you have taken the help of a professional resume writer, make sure you work on that resume with that professional resume writer. Make sure you both are working on it in simultaneously, and you're telling him this kind of stuff you've done, so that it's he's just trying to make your resume better, but what you do is, yeah, basically that. And Renuka, do you want to come back on and we can take a few more questions? Yes, another great question. That is true, that you need to look at the camera straight on for a good eye contact. But something you need to keep in mind is that we are humans, and a lot of times this is going to happen, that you look away for a second, you blink your eyes, and these are just natural things which happen in a regular interview as well. So don't go crazy about the stuff. Try to look at the camera once in a while, so that then the interviewer knows that you're looking straight at him. uh, I know it's not an easy thing to do, because you want to look at the screen, you want to look at the interviewer, because they are on your screen and the camera is at the top. So try. If it's not possible, that's okay. It's completely understandable. You're human. Um, Try to just look at the camera once in a while. And that's a great question. So keep these questions coming in. Thank you for your question, Madhav. Once again, so I want to go back to the point wherein we were talking about confidence, right? I mentioned 55% of of your conversation with the interviewer is your body language, and 38% is your tone. So as soon as you're not comfortable with a question, or if it just depends upon what kind of question it is. So I need more context on the kind of question. Um, I've done a reel which specified on asking illegal questions, like questions about marriage, questions about kids. So it actually depends upon if these are those questions or questions that you simply don't know the answer to, and you need to treat the two separately, right? If it's an illegal question or questions that the interviewer should not be asking you, then you can just bring the focus of the interviewer back to your skills. Uh, a lot of times when people are thrown the question of marriage at them, what people do is they try to be like, I've not thought about that, but what I know is like I can do great things at a company in the next 5 years, and this is how I'm going to do it. So they just take the control back of the conversation, right? They don't try to be rude, uh, even though it's wrong. They just change the perspective, and that just makes the interviewer realize himself that him or her, they were wrong. So, for example, if they ask you why you took a particular decision, it could backfire, or simply the question which you don't know the answers of. So you can talk about your decisions freely. Like, for example, if you've mentioned that you took a particular decision, I think you need to be able to talk about them. Uh, and if you think that decision is going to backfire at you, I would suggest not mentioning that in the first place. Because now that you have mentioned that decision, if you don't talk about it, it'll just be like you're trying to hide something, which you don't want to show. So that's the reason, like I mentioned earlier, you need to take control of the conversation. So just be very sure of what you're saying and what you're not. And and if you don't know the answer to that, again, just be honest about that you're taking someone help to come to that decision. It was a conversation with a colleague, with your manager, who suggested you to take that particular decision, right? And just be honest about it in that case. All right. And I hope that answers your question, Madhav. Anusmita, that's another great question. So, first, what I want you to do over here is you need to do your research on your strengths and weaknesses beforehand. You need to understand what the company does, and then pick a weakness that is not the most important required skill for the job. For example, you are applying for an accounting or finance role, and you say that you're bad with numbers. That won't work, because come on, accounting and finance, they require numbers. So stay away from them. But it's important that you do pick a real weakness, right? Talk about if you think you're overconfident. But what you need to do is, over you just need to quickly mention the weakness. You don't need to stick on your weakness for long. What you need to focus your remaining answer on is you need to focus the remainder of the answer on saying how you've worked on your weakness, what are the things you have done to overcome your weakness, and has there been an incident where you've shown improvement. So, for example, you talk about overconfidence. You say, I've tried to double check my work so that instead of being overconfident, I'm now checking my work. I'd made a mistake in the past. So you don't go into the detail into that mistake, but you talk about that a couple of days back. I had a project. I was double checking my work, and I just realized that I had made an error. So if I had been overconfident, I would have submitted, but I didn't. So I'm working on this constantly, and I've seen improvement already. So focus on the improvement part and pick a weakness that is not completely core to the job factor. Next question. Let's see which one is that. What is the most important thing in your resume? Now, that's an interesting question. I don't think I can pick one thing out of out of the entire resume. I think the entire resume in itself is super important. One thing that, or a couple of things that you need to be sure of is that you don't make any grammatical errors and you customize your resume. But those are more relating to the tips that can make your resume a little better. Whatever you mention on your resume automatically becomes important because now it's under the radar of the interviewer, under the radar of the company, right? So anything you mention can come up in the interview. It's not like if you talk about you write everything, but the interview is only going to talk about your experience. I had mentioned that I'm super passionate about soccer, um, and I like a particular team. And the interviewer wanted to talk about that team because he was a fan of that team as well. And we both just ended up talking about Chelsea for at least 5 to 7 minutes. So that's super important as well. Yes, so if you want some tips, Jay, in regards to making your resume, there are a bunch of things that I can tell you. Uh, so first, let's talk about the first section, right? So I think there are four main sections. First is your name and your contact details. That's on the top. Then the most important is your education section, then your work experience, and then the skills and interest, right? So in terms of your contact details, your name always has to be on bold because that's the most important. When it comes to address, you don't need to make sure that you have written your entire address, street name, no, just city and country. Your LinkedIn has to be there, so make sure your social ID link is there. Try to make your social ID more crisp as well. And like you mentioned, your email ID, it has to be a professional ID. You cannot write Trishank, ROCKS, ROX. No. So, yeah, in terms of tips, there are a lot of things. Uh, if that is the case, you want to know more about tips, we would have to have another webinar. But mention down your email IDs in the comments section, and I will make sure that the team sends over a resume template and the career show resume guide that you can use to make your resume. And if you have any further questions, you can reach out to that email and we'll get back to you. So mention your email IDs down in the comment section, and then we'll reach out to you with the perfect resume guide that you guys need. This is a very, very interesting question, And if you think about it, like tell us one point why we should not select you, is basically the interviewer trying to ask you about your weakness. It's just a fancy way of putting it, right? Again, what you can say is, I think one of my weaknesses that could potentially make me not hire me is this. However, I've been working on it and I've seen improvement. So again, you don't stick on that point for long, but you focus the remaining question on how you've improved. So again, you can take control of this question, right? So just mention that point of weakness, and then the way you can turn it into a convincing answer in your favor is by simply showing the your improvement scale, the steps you've taken to improve and solve that point of weakness that you're mentioning. So a lot of times this is going to happen. People are just going to throw fancy words at you, but at the end of the day, it's just similar questions. You can actually just mention about your weakness and the way you've worked on your weakness in this question, and it will work out in your favor. I think we missed a question from Madhav, which is super exciting as well. So if you could select that, Renuka. So Madhav, the questions have have not changed as much, but interviewers are more curious about how you have used your time during your online semester. They want to see if you have still been able to stay in your same schedule, because the interviewers know that students end up waking up late, or they don't have much to do, they don't have regular exams, they don't have to go to places. So what you need to show the interviewer in such cases is that how you have used your time, and you need to be ready to answer those questions. To answer your question about improved GPA, just be honest about that. Say that you've been working harder. Say that you've been talk about the ways that in which you've improved your GPA. Talk about ways in which the examination method has changed and how you think that has benefited you. So just talk about the changes that you yourself have faced and how you've tackled those changes. I think that's the most important part uh, in this case. So just talk about the changes and how you adapted yourself to the changes, because it also shows that you're an adaptable person. And in case a change ends up happening in the future, or a change ends up happening at the company, you will be adaptable and you will be able to be flexible enough for the company. Let's see, I can take another last question. So if there are any, feel free to put them in. When I was small, the most critical feedback that I would usually receive is is to learn how to communicate. I've mentioned this throughout the this session, and you don't need to just learn to communicate at an interview or with your family, right? It's also with your friends. I have learned so many times that there were times where I used to end up speaking in the middle or something like that, which is just not the best communication skills. So just keep working on your communication skills, because at the end of the day, whether you have your own business or you're working at a company, you're going to have to work with people. And to work with people, you need to know how to communicate effectively.
Yeah, here's an interesting question.
Sure.
Yeah,
You know, asking for a referral on LinkedIn is is not a one-day process. You cannot just write them an email and ask them for a referral. I would say it at least takes 15 to 20 days to get a referral. And those also the chances you need to figure out if it's the right opportunity to ask for a referral. Let me give you an example. There was a company that I was super, super passionate about. Um, Luckily, my university was hosting events for them as well. Uh, Attended the event. So that was day one. Reached out to at least 5 to 6 people from that event. So in the case of LinkedIn, you will reach out to at least 15 to 20 people from the company you want a referral at. You talk to them, you try to do an informational interview with them, you try to impress them with your questions. So this the purpose of informational interviews is just trying to understand what they do, what the company does. So these questions have to be really unique, which you can't find the answers to on Google. So I did this as well, and for some reason I ended up reaching out to only the people in a particular team. So I spoke to an associate, I spoke to a senior associate, and the senior associates simply seemed to love me, and they ended up talking about me in one of their morning meetings. And when I reached out to the next level, the manager, he was like, wait, I've already heard about you from the team. And he easily gave me a call with him, right, for 15 minutes. So And this at least took 15 days. To set up the call with that manager or vice president, it took me a month because his schedule was that busy. So at the end of the day, they themselves were willing to refer me without me even asking. So they will end up asking you, and that happens if you have impressed them really well. But if you haven't, and you see that there is a connection between the person you have reached out to and you've had a call with, that's the only time you can ask for a referral. If you end up asking for a referral just for no reason, the person will not even reply to you. So don't do that. Make meaningful connections. This question is a very subjective question. It just depends upon person to person. For a lot of people, money is not the most important factor. For some people, it is. That's completely all right. There's nothing against the two, right? I think you need to figure out what gives you the most satisfaction, right? For me, with the career show, currently, I'm barely making any money out of it, and I've spent at least 8 months at it. But when I get like great messages in my DMs I get an email saying, "Wow, you've helped me so much." The other day, I get a comment saying, "Because of your reels, I ended up getting a job." Uh, so that's kind of job satisfaction as well. So it's a very subjective thing, right? Uh, but don't get me wrong, money can be a factor as well. So it just depends upon person to person. But make sure that you also like the job you're doing. Just don't pick up a job just because it's paying you well. Uh, figure out figure out what gives you the most satisfaction, and do this before the job. Before you head into that interview, figure out what gives you the most satisfaction about it. If it has the money and the work you like as well, that's great. What How this will help you, how figuring this out will help you, is because eventually when you have a bunch of offers coming in, you'll be able to narrow down your option to the perfect company, to the one that provides you the most job satisfaction, right? Because if you tell me to choose between a job that is only giving me great money and a company which is giving me a little less money than this, but is giving me that the work I'm doing is great, I'll end up going for this. So keep that in mind and figure out what gives you the most job satisfaction.
Yeah, looks like we reached to the end of the session. I personally found this really insightful. Pretty sure that audience also had a great learning. On a final note, would you like to say anything to our audience, like maybe an advice?
There's only one thing I want to tell you guys, and that's stay confident. There are ups and downs in life. Uh, whatever journey you end up picking, there will always be a learning out of it. I did not know the career show was going to reach till here. I just started it as a simple initiative. I, in fact, had like only 500 followers, 600 followers until February. But I was still happy because I was doing something I liked. And if this did not end up being something that I did in the long term, I still knew that I learned a lot out of it, which built my confidence, right? So just be confident, have faith in yourself. There will be ups and downs. Just take them in the stride and learn from your mistakes and learn from everything you experience in life. And I
Yeah,
wish you all the very best of luck. Feel free to reach out to me on my email. Feel free to reach out to us in our Instagram DMs. We usually try to respond to everyone with their doubts. So definitely do that. And I hope this session was helpful to at least one of you people.
yeah, for sure. Thank you for your valuable time. We would like to wish you the best for the career show and all your future endeavors. It was really nice having you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renuka. Take care. Bye, guys.
By the way, this session will be available on ESL NID Triti's YouTube channel. You can find it if you missed anything. Thank you.